This man builds a secret underground dungeon and keeps a girl down there for 24 years. And while she's down there, he forces her to have 7 of his children. So the man behind it all is this creepy old guy named Joseph Fritzl. He's 49 years old, living in Austria, and this man is an absolute monster. And even that's an understatement, because years earlier, he locked his own mother away in an attic for 20 years until she died. Then he broke into a nurse's home and assaulted her at knife point. So yeah, definitely not somebody who should have kids. But of course he does. He has 7 kids with his wife Rosemary, and inside their house he rules like a tyrant. He controls his wife, he punishes the kids for every little thing, and eventually they all just learn that his word is law. But when his daughter Elizabeth turns 11, he starts giving her the type of attention no father ever should. He punishes her harder than the other kids. He SAs her until eventually she just becomes fearful, quiet, and withdrawn. And by 16, Elizabeth is so fed up that she tries running away multiple times. But each time, police just catch her and bring her right back home. So Joseph decides if she won't stop running, he'll make it so that she can never leave again. And that's when he decides to build a literal dungeon in secret. He tells everyone he's just building a fallout shelter. And back then, a lot of people were making those, so nobody thought it was weird. And at first, he actually builds a normal looking shelter. Concrete walls, storage space, nothing that would raise eyebrows. But then little by little, he starts adding these secret doors that you wouldn't even realize were doors. Like one of them was hidden behind a shelf stocked with paint. And it wasn't just some secret Harry Potter door that you push on and it swings open. No, some of these doors weighed over 1,000 pounds and they would only open with a special key, while others open with passwords that only Joseph knew. So if you ever walked into his basement, you'd think, oh, this is nice. But behind those walls, past door after door after door, is a maze only he can open. And because Joseph was also an electrical engineer, he was able to wire the entire thing with lights, power, and ventilation all by himself. He even soundproofed the entire dungeon so nobody could hear the screams of his victim. And while he's doing all of this, nobody suspects a thing. So by August 1984, Joseph's project is ready. Now he just needs a way to lower his own daughter down there. So one day on August 28th, 1984, Joseph calls his daughter Elizabeth, who by then is 18 years old, down into the basement. He tells her he needs help holding a door while he puts it into place. But what she doesn't know is that this door is one of the last pieces to his trap. And as she's standing there, boom! Joseph suddenly presses a chemical-soaked cloth over her mouth until she passes out. He then drags her into the dungeon and seals the door permanently. And just like that, Elizabeth's world becomes a living horror for the next 24 years. Now that same day, when Elizabeth didn't come home at all, not to dinner, not to work, her mother Rosemary started to panic. So she straight up asks Joseph, where the hell is our daughter? And Joseph already had an excuse ready, one that he probably rehearsed a million times in his sick head. He tells her Elizabeth had simply ran away, that she'd gone off and joined some kind of cult. And the sad part is, it actually sounded believable. Because remember, Elizabeth had already tried to run away before. So Rosemary honestly thought maybe this time she finally went through with it. But still, she was a mother at the end of the day. She was still worried, so she filed a missing persons report. But that was a big problem for Joseph. He couldn't have cops doing all this digging. So at some point, he goes down to the basement and forces Elizabeth to write a letter saying that she's tired of the family and doesn't want to be found. Joseph then showed it to Rosemary and the police, and just like that, the search is dropped. And while the whole story is buying his cult story, Elizabeth is chained up to a bed in this pitch black room. And when I say pitch black, I mean it. There were no windows, no sunlight, no way for her to tell if it was morning or night. And the place itself was disgusting. It is freezing cold down there. The walls are damp. And whenever it rained, the water would leak down the walls and she would just wake up completely soaked. And not to mention, the smell was unbearable. There is mold covering the walls. Rats are crawling around everywhere. I mean, it was just disgusting. And she's chained up so tight, she can barely move even a foot. And Joseph, he comes down whenever he feels like it. Sometimes to beat her, to starve her, but mostly to SA her over and over and over again. But here's the part that makes me sick, more than what I already am. Like 6 or 7 months go by and Joseph finally takes the chains off. But not out of mercy or kindness. It was only because they were getting in the way when he was assaulted. Like, what an actual monster. And once the chains were off, things only got worse. He gets her pregnant for a second time, and when she's finally about to give birth, he doesn't even help her. He just hands her an old medical guidebook and says, figure it out yourself. So in 1988, down in that dark, moldy bunker, Elizabeth somehow manages to give birth to her first surviving child, a little girl named Kirsten. And Joseph didn't even come to check on her or the baby for 10 days straight. And I truly don't know how Elizabeth did it, but she managed to keep her baby alive all by herself. But another year later, in 1990, Joseph gets Elizabeth pregnant again. It's actually a boy this time, and she names him Stephen. So now both of these kids remain underground, never leaving those walls, which is just so incredibly sad. Oh my god. But even with all that, Elizabeth is still trying to make the cellar livable for them. She starts decorating the bathroom tiles with little drawings like a yellow snail, a purple octopus, stars, and suns, things that the children have never seen in real life. She teaches them to read and write. She invents stories about pirates and princesses, basically anything to make life feel less like hell for them. But Joseph made sure her life was still hell. He keeps on her brutally until another 3 years pass, and he forces her to give birth to another little girl named Lisa. But this time, Joseph does something so twisted. One day, he forces Elizabeth to write a sick note. The note said, quote, "Dear parents, I'm leaving you my little daughter, Lisa. Take good care of my little girl." And then Joseph takes the letter, he grabs the baby, takes her upstairs, and leaves her at the front of their house, making it look like Elizabeth abandoned her there. And that same morning, he goes to the front door, opens it, and goes, "Oh my god, look! A crying baby on the doorstep. Who could have put that there?" He shows the baby to Rosemary, and honestly, she's probably just relieved to know that her daughter is, one, alive, and two, has a piece of her back. And eventually, Joseph even shows the baby to local authorities, which is actually kind of shocking, but he probably did that just to sell the story even harder. And to disgust you even more, Rosemary and Joseph end up adopting Lisa. So basically, the man legally adopting her is both her father and grandfather. Oh my god, that's disgusting. But Joseph isn't done with Elizabeth. Oh no. He is just getting started, because about 2 years later, he gets Elizabeth pregnant again. This time it's another baby girl. And of course, Joseph pulls the same 6 stunts. He takes the baby upstairs, leaves her at the front door, and then just acts like Elizabeth left her there. And then another 2 years go by, and yup, he gets her pregnant again, this time with twin boys. But the conditions in that cellar were so horrific that one of the twins, little Michael, was born incredibly weak, like he could barely breathe. And Elizabeth is begging Joseph, like, please take him to the hospital, he is not going to make it. And Joseph, he just looks at her and coldly says, what will be, will be. Are you kidding me right now? That's basically him saying, it is what it is. That is insane. And sure enough, at just 3 days old, baby Michael ends up dying in Elizabeth's arms. And just when you think this man couldn't get any more evil, he proves you wrong. Joseph takes baby Michael's little body and in their furnace like it's nothing. And then he scatters the ashes in the garden behind his house. Okay, I think we need a second to breathe because this is a lot, so let's breathe. Okay, let's continue. So after Michael dies, Joseph doesn't care, clearly. He just keeps right on abusing Elizabeth like nothing ever happened. And over the years, Elizabeth keeps giving birth again and again and again and again. In total, 7 children are born in that filthy cellar, all fathered by her own dad. And by the time the last one is born, Joseph is 67 years old. What he needs to do is find a freaking retirement home, preferably in a jail cell. Now here's the wild part though. 3 of those children were taken upstairs and adopted by Joseph and Rosemary. Their names were Lisa, Monica, and Alexander. So to the outside world, it just looked like Rosemary and Joseph kept mysteriously finding babies on their doorstep. And at this point, people are like, how many babies will Elizabeth drop off from this so-called cult? 1, maybe 2, okay, sure. But 3, yeah, no, it's looking very sketchy. But every single time, Joseph covers it with one of those fake letters. And somehow, for whatever reason, people just keep on believing it. And just to really put it in perspective, how much time has passed, Elizabeth's first baby, Kirsten, is 15 years old. And Elizabeth herself is already 36. I mean, she's already spent half her life in that dungeon. That's genuinely insane if you really think about it. But to add more into how evil this man is, he would take pictures of the 3 kids he adopted doing totally normal stuff. They'd be swimming in a pool, playing in the snow, blowing out candles at their birthday parties. Then he'd carry those photos downstairs and shove them in the face of the kids who are stuck in the cellar. He'd be like, see this? Look at what your brothers and sisters get to do. It was his sinister way of reminding them, that's a life you'll never have. You will never see the sun, you will never make friends, and you will never go outside. But listen, I could sit here all day and unfold story after story of the horrific things Joseph did to Elizabeth and the kids. But if I keep going, we're gonna be here for the next 24 years right alongside them, because that is exactly how long it lasted. So let's fast forward to the moment this evil, deranged maniac slips up and finally gets caught. It all starts when one day in 2008, Joseph suddenly has a big problem. Elizabeth's oldest child, Kirsten, who is now 19 years old, gets really sick because after spending her entire life underground with no sun, no fresh air, no doctors, her body just gives up and her kidneys start failing. And Elizabeth knows if she doesn't get medical help right now, she is going to lose her daughter. So she gets on her knees and literally starts begging him. She's saying, please, 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 for once in your life, just take her to the hospital or she's gonna die. And that's when Joseph actually freezes for a second, because for the first time in 24 years, he doesn't know what to do. Normally, he would just whip up one of those fake letters, drop a baby at the doorstep, and pretend that Elizabeth left it there. But this is different. Kirsten isn't a baby. She's 19 years old, and her body is so malnourished and abused that there is no way to explain this. And if she shows up to the hospital, doctors are gonna take one look at her and be like, what the actual fuck is going on here? But that's not even Joseph's only problem. If Kirsten dies down there, he can't just make her disappear like he did to baby Michael. She's too big to hide, too risky to move. And where the hell would he even put her body without making people ask questions? So no matter what Joseph does, he's screwed. So he comes up with this dumb plan that in his sick little head he thinks is going to explain everything. He decides to double down on his old story, the whole cult thing. So he goes back to the dungeon and forces Elizabeth to write another letter. And in this letter, she's supposed to say, oh hey, by the way, Kirsten is my other daughter. She's like 19 years old. I raised her all by myself in the cult, and now surprise, she got really sick. So I'm gonna drop her off here. It's so stupid, I know, but that's exactly what he does. And the second Kirsten shows up at the hospital, doctors are like, yeah, no, this is not adding up at all. She is pale as a ghost. I mean, her skin looks like she'd never seen sunlight before. Her teeth are completely destroyed because remember, she's never been to a dentist. And on top of that, she has zero medical history. It's like she doesn't even exist in the system. So doctors immediately pick up the phone and call the police. And they're like, listen, the story that this man is selling us right now, a quote, a letter, we're not buying it. And police agree. So they're like, okay, where's the mother? Because if Kirsten really came from a cult, if this is really Elizabeth's kid, then we need to see her right now. And at that point, Joseph starts sweating and he's shaking because he knows if he doesn't bring Elizabeth, they're going to dig until they find her. So in his twisted little brain, the only move he thinks he has left is to bring Elizabeth up from the dungeon and pray he can manipulate her into lying for him to the police. But Joseph still has another big problem. He can't just bring Elizabeth upstairs without people asking questions. So he tells everyone this BS story that Elizabeth has quit the cult and come home to take care of her sick daughter. And once that's done, he goes down into the cellar, and for the first time in 24 years, he brings Elizabeth and her 3 other children outside. He then drags her straight into the police interrogation room, still trying to control every single move she makes. The whole time, he's whispering into her ear, telling her the same poison he's been telling her for years. Do not say a word. Nobody will believe you. And if you try to talk, I will take your children. So she's sitting there in front of these detectives, completely silent and terrified. And these detectives are looking at her and they're like, she is not okay. So they decide to make a smart move. They take Elizabeth and they move her to a private room without Joseph. And that's when they basically tell her, we suspect that you're the one abusing Kirsten, and if you don't explain yourself, you're going to be the one to end up in jail. And that just breaks her. Elizabeth just bursts into tears because she would never hurt her children. But she also can't escape the control that Joseph has drilled into her head for the past 24 years. And even in that room with him gone, surrounded by all these detectives, she still feels his presence, like he's right behind her, breathing down her neck. But eventually, through all the tears, she begs the police for one single promise. I will tell you everything, every horrific detail, only if you promise me I will never have to see my father's face again. And right then and there, the police assure her she won't. And once she hears that, Elizabeth lets it all out. The cellar, the maze of doors, the chains, the abuse, the children born underground, everything. And the detectives are just sitting there like, what the fuck? So immediately, Joseph Fritzl is finally arrested on the spot. They throw him into custody and charge him with everything under the sun. False imprisonment, incest, SA, murder for the baby that died, all of it. And when it finally goes to trial, Joseph walks into the courtroom all smug, like he's still in control, but then Elizabeth shows up too. And to protect her identity, she's wearing a wig, which means that Joseph didn't even realize it was her at first. She looks right at him, and the second they lock eyes, he freezes. He knows that's her now, and all of that fake confidence just drains out of him. Because for the first time ever, he knows he does not have power over her anymore. And that's when the court hits him with a verdict: life in prison, no parole. And just like that, his narcissistic, evil, maniac, deranged, psychopathic, manipulative, I mean, I can go on, he is never walking free again. That is what I love to hear. Lock him up. Group hug to Elizabeth and all her children. They deserve eternal peace. And group hug to you guys as well. I love you. I will see you in my next video. Mwah.